The first thing is I wanted to kind of get into your brain on what made you start running to where you literally went from, like, in high school I ran track, cross country, but I hated it. And then I'd like to kind of show up to random races and then without running. So I just ran my first marathon, and it was
you killed it.
It's the only race that I ever trained for, and I appreciate that. My goal was 3:45. My non-negotiable was 4. My stretch goal was 3:30, and I got 3:27.
Bro, it's incredible.
I appreciate that, but I was kind of like, I didn't know what I didn't know. So when I got done, I was just like, man, I could have pushed. But it's kind of one of those things that I didn't want to start with, like, let's say the 3:15 pace group, and then
die.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you, on the other hand, you grew up playing football. You know, you've always been a pretty bulky guy, like muscly guy, and so I never knew that you ran. So walk me through that. What got, and then you went to the straight 100-miler, dude. What?
Yeah, so I don't recommend my mentality for most people. Like, I'm a psychopath in some things. So most of my mentality towards life, like, I wouldn't recommend most people start the way I do. But the shortest version of explanation is that I had some friends that were doing it and kept kind of prodding me, like, bro, you should run with us. Just pick a mileage. You do a 5K. You could do a half. Like, just do a mileage. I'm like, no, I'm good, man. I'm not a runner. Like, I'm fine. Kept prodding. And I started to think about it, and I was like, why am I so resistant to this? Like, why don't I want to do this? And then the first thought was like, because it would suck. It's hard. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so once I had that realization, I'm like, that's probably exactly why I need to do it, because there's a little fear there. And so it was more of a mental challenge for me. It was like, there's something in my life that I'm kind of afraid of, that I'm not built for, that I don't see myself as a runner. So now I get to prepare for something that's difficult and put my mind through that. And it was an incredible experience. Now, practically, would not recommend anyone train 8 weeks for a 100-mile run.
How many miles do you think you ran on those 8 weeks?
Not enough. I mean, I went from, like, the first couple weeks were 10 to 15, then 20 to 30. Then I was ramping up my mileage significantly hard, but I never did a week over 60 miles. Because the biggest one was the 2 weeks before. Then I kind of had a recovery, as I did a 40-mile weekend, but I had done like 20 miles during the week. That was the farthest I'd ever gone. But I went from 8 weeks before that. I'd never done more than like a few miles without stopping, and I had not run at all in years. And I was 217 pounds. Like, I was thick, and was still like trying to train for this. So
how much do you weigh right now?
210.
And how much did you weigh before?
Before I started training, I was about where I am right now, 210. Really? So I actually gained weight during that process, because I stopped working out as much, and it was more running, and I was shoving my face with calories, trying to make sure I had fuel. I probably could have approached it a little better on the fuel side, but I was like, I will make sure I'm not gassing out. Because the first couple runs, I would, like, my first 10, 15 mile runs, I was like crapping out because I didn't have enough food, because I was trying to stay in a calorie deficit. And I finally was like, you know what? No, I'm just eating. I'm eating like a runner.
Dude, I started at like 175 to 178, and right now, so this morning I weighed 163.
So you've lost a lot of weight.
I feel like super tiny. So you signed up for this 100-mile race, and then last minute they changed the location on you.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go and run it, and you said you ended up completing 79 miles.
So, yeah, it was Brazos Bend. It was supposed to be in Houston, and we got an email that said, hey, there's a weather forecast that we need to move it back a month. And all the guys that I was running with, I'm like, I'm not going to train all the way through the holidays, wait another month. I'm already here. So we ended up gathering in Dallas and did it just off a whim. And, yeah, so I made it 22 hours in, 79 miles, which is over 3 marathons, and then my body started falling apart, and I had to make a decision. I'm like, is it worth it to?
Oh, so you didn't even get capped? It was you just.
I just was done. And so basically what happened is my last mile that I walked, I didn't even jog any of the last one. It took me 55 minutes, almost an hour, and I'm like,
1 mile,
bro. I was
well. I will say I can't picture even running another mile after I got done doing 26 miles.
Now imagine doing that 3 more times. Or 2 more times, so 3 total marathons, and then being like, my last one took me 55 minutes. Like, am I going to walk? Well, the time cap was 24 hours, so it's like I
can't wrap my head around that.
Bro, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I think I was at 21 hours, and so I had technically 3 hours or something like that. I forget the exact math, but I had a couple hours left, and my last one took almost an hour, and I'm like, this is the most pain I've ever been in my life. I was hobbling bad, dragging one leg, So I'm like, okay, is it worth it to walk another 3 miles? And like, what's this going to make a difference?
Because you weren't going to finish.
Because I wasn't going to finish in the time cap. So that was some of it. But also like, you know, if you've heard, I'm sure you've followed David Goggins, you've heard his stuff. His story for his 100 miler was similar. He didn't really train enough, but for him to get over that last point, like he basically was puking blood and like had to go to the hospital because his like internal organs got torn up. And
well, he like pooped on himself a couple times, and then his feet were just. I mean, I've read both of his books, and I'm glad you're bringing this up because I've mentioned this in one other podcast a little bit, but I might actually read it word for word. But and I heard this on a podcast that he was on with Andrew Huberman.
Yeah.
And so he said the neuroscience research on willpower. So shameless plug there on the podcast name makes clear that your anterior mid singular cortex, your AMCC, is a key hub for the leaning into undesired effort. Your AMCC is activated by engaging in behaviors that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Your AMCC willpower can grow through the, you know, and it goes on to, he wrote this whole thing, but in the podcast, he talked about how people that pretty much like David Goggins that like have lived a hard life or go through they're able to pretty much not only live longer but have a better life because they put themselves through things that they don't want to do. So I'm not sure if you've seen, but one of the things I started doing is every single day starting this year, as soon as I wake up, I go and get in the cold tub.
Plunge. Yeah.
And I don't want to do it, dude. I don't want to do it, but I can't start the day any harder than that. But I just love sitting with somebody like that right now because when I talk to people, they can't understand
think you're crazy.
That.
Like, why would you choose to do that if you don't want to? I'm like, that's the point. Because I don't want to, I do it.
So where was your mindset whenever you didn't finish, and how did you feel? Talk to me about the post-recovery and all that stuff.
Bro.
Because, I mean, I was pissed about my 327. Like, I wasn't happy.
No.
So where were you at? Walk me through that.
So it's a tough line because I'm such a competitor. And, you know, for those listening that don't, like, I played college football. I played sports my whole life. Like, I'm a very driven, competitive person, not just with other people, with myself. Like, I push myself to the limit. It's part of why I did this. I'm like, well, okay, it's another goal to chase. But there was that part of me, but there's also a realist of like, dude, you're 217 pounds. You trained for 8 weeks and you'd never really run before. Like, what did you expect? And so I think there was like both sides of that duality of, as a competitor who believes himself, and I'd set a goal, I was devastated I didn't reach it and mad at myself that I shut it down. And like, there's those thoughts. But for me, there was also like, there's a big gift in this. Like, it's probably the best possible thing that could have happened for me of not finishing it, because there's so many lessons in that I learned of like, man, I'm not a superhuman. Like, I've got to put the work in like everyone else, and I can't out willpower my like mental power is powerful. Like, my mindset got me to 79 miles, not my physical preparation. But there's also a limit of preparation too. And I realized like, hey, I can't just like throw myself at whatever I want and be successful immediately. Like, there's work I have to put in. But there's so many things that I learned, and this is really probably the deepest reason why I signed up for this race, is those middle of the night hours where you're just by yourself suffering, like, taught me so much. Like, I hadn't been in that place in probably since football, and there's very small glimpses of it in games, but like for hours of just pain and suffering of like, why am I doing this? And then you start to like think about what you're thinking about and know where your thoughts go. And like you experience suffering that you've chosen to put yourself into for hours that are prolonged. It opens up so much inside of you that you're like, I've never experienced this before. It's cool to be in this place.